Fully 25% of those incarcerated in Canada's prisons today are considered elderly, which for prisoners is 50 years of age and older. It's a growing cohort, and according to a new federal report, the system is not equipped to deal with them because, quote, prisons were never intended to be nursing homes, hospices, or long-term care facilities. So, what should be done with aging prisoners? Let's ask Ivan Zinger. He is correctional investigator for Canada, and Laura Tamblin-Watts, Chief Public Policy Officer at CARP. That's an organization that advocates for older Canadians, and we're delighted to have you two here on TVO tonight to help us out with this. I'd like to know, first of all, what prompted the writing of this report?
Well, my office, the Office of Correctional Investigator, has been dealing with these issues for now over 15 years. We've made countless recommendations to try to improve a trend that has been known for many, many years. So this time was an opportunity for us to give a voice to those men and women who are aging and dying in our penitentiaries.
Any sense, Laura, about how many people we're talking about here?
It's, I think, about 14,000 people, but we see this as an increasing problem because the way that the aging demographic is not, year by year. It's actually sort of on this type of a scale. So we're seeing this sharply increasing. We're very worried about it.
I'm over 50 and I don't consider myself elderly, but for your purposes, 50 plus is considered elderly. How come?
Well, the research shows that upon admission, people who come into the penitentiary system, the federal system, are usually showing ages that may be 10 years older than their chronological age. So they come in with, chronic diseases and many issues health-wise. And when we talk about death in custody, the average age for natural death in penitentiaries is age 60, and that's a far cry from the normal life expectation.
Chronologically, they may be 50, but because of the hard lives they have led, they may present as 60-year-olds or beyond.
Exactly.
That's the idea. Can you share with us some of the stories you've heard about experiences that have happened?
We really see a wide range of experiences, and this falls into a couple different categories. And the report really shows that. You have some that go in for perhaps a serious offense and then never get released. And you'd expect them to be released on average, maybe about 18 years in, but actually they're there for decades and decades. So we see people aging in prison who should have actually been released for patrol. So we're worried about that. We also see people who may have committed offenses, maybe they're sex offenses that are historical, and they go in as an older person, and then they have to contend with those types of scenarios. But what we see also is that people who may have some type of cognitive impairment, mental health addictions, or increasingly dementia being put into long-term care or developing dementia into long-term care. And for those group of people, we really are not meeting any of their basic needs.
What's the sense about how much it costs to keep an inmate in a prison?
Well, the average cost for federal correction is $116,000 a year. And we know from research and from the data that we have per inmate.
More than $100,000 a year per inmate.
Per inmate per year. And when you're looking at aging offenders, you can factor more. It could be as far as 2 to 4 times more than for younger inmates. So the costs are extraordinarily high. And our view is that many of them do not pose a safety risk to society. The costs are exorbitant, and we believe that there's unnecessary incarceration that is taking place, and that many of those offenders could be accommodated better with more dignity in the community in a setting such as a nursing home or a halfway house or a long-term care facility that would be paid by corrections that would be at a fraction of the cost of keeping them incarcerated.
So cheaper and better.
Yeah.
If it's cheaper and better, why aren't we doing it?
I think mostly because they're old. And on the whole, we ignore issues related to older people or throw our hands up and say it's too difficult to figure out. So the corrections issue is say we're not supposed to be nursing homes, we're not supposed to be healthcare providers, we're not supposed to be helping people with diaper changes or blood issues, or
and they may not have been trained to do it either for that.
On the whole, they're not. It's not their job. But on the other hand, we see that in our nursing home systems, we already don't have beds for people in the community, and we already don't have kind of community-based supports. So we have a lot of people doing this. And so what happens, I think, is that older offenders just get left.
You have a substantial report on the table in front of you, which I suspect you know a little something about, replete with recommendations, no doubt. Why don't you give us the recommendation that you think would be most significant to alleviating the problems we've been talking about?
I think it's about shifting resources to the community. So when we conducted this investigation jointly with the Canadian Human Rights Commission, I should say, in partnership, we found too many instances where it was clear to us that you have to sort of scratch your head and figure out why those individuals are in jail, incarcerated, when they may be in wheelchair, they may suffer from dementia, they may have not even being aware of what's going on around them. They may, be having to help in terms of mobility with walkers, canes. Some have oxygen tanks and
Doesn't sound like they're really a threat to anybody.
Exactly, and that certainly, if they are, the whatever risk they pose can be probably managed very well in the community. So I think it's about shifting. The main recommendation is about shifting the resources that corrections has, and corrections has a lot of resources, a budget of $2.5 billion, and trying to get better correctional outcome. And save some money and shift those resources in the community. There are many organizations. There are, for example, a couple of halfway houses that are highlighted in this as best practices. The Haley House in Peterborough, and there's a Crossroad in Quebec. And those individuals would be more than happy to enhance services so that they can offer palliative services, end-of-life services, geriatric services, these kinds of things. But you could expand this, and there's many organizations like St. Leonard's Society, John Howard Society, for example, or Elizabeth Fry Society, that would be very much willing to take on this segment of the inmate population and provide services that are, more in line with what Canadian, I think, expect.
Okay, that's one view. That is, if I may put it this way, a more progressive approach to the issue. There are going to be people watching this right now saying, you know what, they did the crime, they got to do the time. Too bad about your personal circumstances. Jail is the place for you. What would you say to them? On
the whole, jail is usually probably not the place for these people. So we're not talking about people who just happen to not want to be in jail. It's really a mismatch from the service delivery model and their needs and their human rights associated with it. So we're talking about things like end-of-life care and compassionate care. There's no reason to die in jail, and jails weren't made for those reasons. I think another piece, though, is that you have to see, and this report really showed, that older prisoners are not being released in a timely fashion. They're being left to languish in jail, and that's often for a lack of adequacy in terms of advocacy or community-based resources. So if they were younger, they would probably get out, but their cases are being ignored, and that's not acceptable.
Okay, but let me do a follow-up here. If there are lots of people in society already who haven't committed crimes, who are on wait lists to get into long-term care facilities or places that are more appropriate to their needs. Are we saying we want them to wait even longer so that somebody who may have a criminal record and who could, avail themselves of those facilities just as well, ought to have that opportunity?
There's a huge stigma piece to that when they say, my mom has been waiting for 3 years, but you're telling me this person who committed this terrible crime can get in before me. And that is part of the tension that we're seeing. But I think it's a bit of a false tension. They have to be somewhere because we have a federal responsibility, or in some cases a provincial responsibility. We can't just wash our hands and say we're just not going to pay attention to this issue. So there has to be services built. But what it should not be is at cost of people who also need those services. So what we're talking about is adding services, not taking away from people who already need those services.
Ivan, what would you say to that person who feels that pain the same way?
Well, I think we're not trying to steal any existing beds. I think the Correctional Services of Canada must purchase those beds and do RFPs and put it for tender. And, for example, in the States, the state of Connecticut, for example, they actually partner with the private sector. And they bought basically bed capacity for a nursing home. So these are extras at a fraction of the cost. So I think there's some juggling around resources, and it's always difficult for a large organization to let go of their resources. But this should be done, and this is one area where the service needs to move quickly because there are many instances where aging offenders are being victimized, intimidated, bullied inside prison. There are being, for example, their younger offenders may muscle them to give out their canteen or give out their prescription drugs. And the service isn't just not up to the task to protect those vulnerable inmates.
Now, I think the justice system, Laura, does provide for something like compassionate release. That if somebody is, pretty much not a threat to anybody anymore and their personal health circumstances are dire, they can get out early. Is that something you're advocating for more?
What we see is that compassionate relief exists more in theory than it does in practice in Canada for aging offenders. And it's rare that we would say something like the American system does it better. In fact, it's quite shocking to say that about a prison system, except I'm going to say that the American system in many cases does it better, in other countries many more than that. So we have a compassionate care release program, but we just mostly don't use it. And what I'm saying is we need to pay attention to the resources that we do have, where we have people languishing that should be out. We should make sure that we're paying attention to them. Just because they're older doesn't mean their cases should be ignored.
Let me read this quote here from, this is from a spokesperson for Correctional Services Canada, and we'll get our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring the graphic up so everybody at home can read along. We agree, they say, that the issues identified by the OCI, that's the Office of the Correctional Investigator, in its reports are important. Though our approaches may differ, given that we must also manage the operational, financial, and staffing realities that come with making any changes, we believe we are making progress towards our shared goals and desired outcomes. Ivan, do you agree with that statement?
Well, I actually wrote to the commissioner a letter once I received her response to my recommendations to sort of to voice my concern that the response that we were provided by her organization was basically recycled material from a year ago, which was taken into consideration when we wrote this report. So the problem is one of having concrete steps and timelines.
Well, they say they're doing it. They say they're making progress already on your recommendations.
Yes, but this is an issue that has been going on that we've been raising for 15 years now, and there's no sense of urgency in that response. So I have no problem that more research, more studies, more reviews are required, but at one point you got to say we have individuals that are languishing in prison, and also dying of natural cause in prison where they could actually be transferred to the community. Let's do something with that, and let's, for example, put a group together and review all the cases and buy some beds and get it moved on. So this is the question of a bureaucracy that is taking far too long. This is an issue that is remarkable. Back in the year 2000, Correctional Services Canada actually established older offender branch because they saw that this was coming. It was, of course, disbanded 2 years later. They were supposed to do a national strategy for aging offenders and never did. And we're still not further ahead. There's a draft now out there. We still haven't seen it hasn't been released publicly. So it's very difficult to be in a business where you are constantly reminded that there's better and more effective way and more humane way of doing business, and the bureaucracy is just not able to catch up.
Laura, how confident are you that Correctional Services Canada is adequately seized of this issue?
Not very confident at all. We've been tracking this issue for about 15 to 20 years and have seen excellent reports like the one that's hit today. And yet almost no changes in between. And I would offer that in our review, it's pure ageism. The World Health Organization found in 2017 that ageism was the most common form of discrimination in the world, more than race, more than gender, more than sexual orientation, more than religion. Ageism. And I'd suggest to you that if you had 20 years of reports saying massive and significant human rights abuses are happening to a particular population, if you put those into other forms of isms to a particular population, a younger population, an Indigenous population, a Black population, there might be a sense of urgency. But there is almost no sense of urgency because the sense is that older people will simply die and the problem will go away. And yet we know the demographics aren't working that. They are sharply increasing year over year, and urgent steps are needed now.
Well, we are happy to put the issue on the radar screen for those watching and listening to us right now. So we thank Laura Tamblin-Watts from CARP and Ivan Zinger, the Correctional Investigator of Canada, for coming into TVO tonight. Thanks so much, you two.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.